Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive kill team 40k podcast, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm joined by the Arctic camo paint scheme of 2 victory points of Battle Ready to my 1 point victory over Colts. Connor, how you doing this evening, Connor?
I'm good, thanks, Ryan. I've also heard that you've got a burning topic you'd like to talk about.
Oh, burning! Yeah, nice. It's pretty hot off the press, this one. So I'm just going to get out there and say it. Flamers suck. All right, so flamers suck, and I'm going to explain why. Right, because this is a conversation that goes around and around and around, and everyone talks about, maybe take a flame here, take a flame here. Unless you're playing novitiates or you've got some super ridiculous icon flamer or your Galapox or something like that. If you're using a standard flamer, almost always they suck. Okay, and I'm done pretending that they don't. It is what it is, and I know everyone's out there everyone's going to say to me, they're going to say it now. But Ryan, on ITD flamers are great. No, they're not. They still suck, right? So
But what are you really?
I'm sorry, I'm sitting on the fence here about it, but and the reason why I want to do this is it's the actual sort of topic that I want to get into is, as a competitive player, you really have to start looking at the numbers of things, right? So I will actually look at the damage you're doing, how that damage is delivered, what your percentage chance to kill is, and what are the restraints in being able to deliver that damage and that sort of stuff, right? So that's kind of what I think is important to get at. And, we've been doing the battle reps recently online and on the Patreon. And one of the things that we've been doing on there is putting up the percentage chance to kill. So when someone says oh, I'm really annoyed that didn't come off, or I'm surprised that it did, you can actually look at the stats and think, was that likely to happen? Yes or no? And then people can make a decision for themselves. So we did a little bit of work on the kill team calculator. So, a massive thanks again to Jacob Egner for putting this up there and making it available for everyone to use. So it is probably
a tool, isn't it?
It is one of the best tools that I've ever used. I use it all the time, and I cannot recommend it enough to people. It's available via our link tree. If you're struggling to find it, you can just go onto the Turning Point Tactics link tree. It's there for you. A massive props and credit to him, because Jake's done a fantastic job of making this, I think, very, very easy to use. I know it doesn't have every possible iteration out there, but it's good enough for government work, right? So we've done a little bit of work on that, Connor. So are you able to tell me, versus a horde baseline, so a 7 wounds, 5 up save guy in cover, what the average damage would be and the chance of kill?
Well, you're going to kill him, aren't you? Well, actually, no, you're not going to kill him. I think you're actually only forecasting 5.5 damage, and the chance to kill is even worse. It's only a 17.95% chance to kill this guy. But we've excluded Into the Dark, so let's jump over to Into the Dark. There, we see a massive boost. We got to 5.18 damage expected and a whopping 19.20% chance to kill.
So this is my point, all right? So you're getting an extra, basically 0.1 damage through. Wow. And you're getting an extra 1.25% chance to kill, right? And everyone's going to be like, but Ryan, it's lethal 5. It's going to make all the difference. And I'm just going to explain this in the way that the dice might roll out. So you're going to roll 5 dice, okay? And you're going to get 2 hits, and you're going to get 2 crits on Into the Dark, right? Because you've got lethal 5. And one of them is probably going to miss. That's just the way of life, all right? Your opponent's going to roll their saves, and they're going to get, let's say, 2 saves. They're going to block the 2 regular hits, and they're going to take the 2 crits, which is going to be 4 damage, right? Occasionally, you're going to get 6 damage if you hit everything. Let's say that you are on open board. It's exactly the same scenario. It doesn't matter really how many crits you roll. It's only when you start getting to 3 crits versus Space Marine armor where you might see a small bump in damage. But have a guess what Space Marines don't care about? A 2 damage weapon, right? So this weapon at best wounds people, right? But generically, guys, please do not think it's going to do anything more than that for you. All right, so you really have to understand it's gonna wound people, probably on a 7 wound model, and it's gonna half health an 8 wound model, and it's not going to give you anything else. And there's a whole bunch of restrictions that then come with this. Okay, so it's only 6-inch range. The torrent ability requires you to have full line of sight to multiple operatives, which really doesn't come up that much. So like think about that as well. It's not something that's going to be regularly occurring, and you're trading out potentially, like let's say it's about vet guard, you're trading out like a demo guy or a sniper or a plasma gun or a melter gun or a grenade launcher, and all of these weapons are statistically so much better and have so much or fewer restrictions imposed upon them. So I just really want to get out to those people as a general sort of like point is, really look into the maths of these weapons, understand what they give you, what they don't, and where the restrictions lie. But also, I think just as a general point, flamers suck. Let them die. All right. So like, and please like stop saying it's going to be better in Into the Dark, because the maths just doesn't really back it. Right. Like, okay, sure, 1.25% chance increase to kill and an extra 0.1 damage. That's really not what we're like after, right? So unless you're like, as I said, unless you're got some super flamers like the Vitiates or someone like that, they're really not that good. So that's kind of my hot take topic of the day. And I just thought I'd just throw it out there. But yeah,
valid, agreed. Flamers suck. But I'll tell you what doesn't suck. King of the North tournament that you just visited. How'd that go?
Oh yeah, we love a King of the North tournament. It was pretty epic. So I'm just going to check how many players there were. I think it was around 20-ish. I want to say 24 players in the end, which is pretty cool.
Wow, nice.
And a pretty wide selection of kill teams taken. And a lot of the, I guess, big baddies were out there as well. So I think it was, I want to say, the hardest tournament I've been to recently. And even in comparison to Fest, it was like really tough. And I'm not sure if Fest was harder or this one was harder, but like it was difficult. Like it was a properly competitive, hard fought tournament. And like it's crazy how good the North are getting. Like
it's so cool, isn't it? It's so cool that like the metas are evolving and everyone's just getting better and better.
Yeah, and we'll talk through just quickly, I guess, a few of the games because it's probably just worth covering them off so people can see roughly what happened. So I decided to take the Inquisition squad. There's actually a bit to talk about here because, like, what roster did you take is now actually a thing, right? So I ended up running Breaches, RBTs, and Kazakin on my roster. Generically, I was going to play the Breaches into your Horde teams. I was going to play the RBTs into your mid-range and your Brutes, and I was going to play Kazakin into elites, right? So that was my rough game plan going in. And so my first game was against Vet Guard, a guy called Peter. Great game. We're playing loot. I think he was, still fairly new to kill team, so I was able to sort of get quite a good lead early on there. And sorry, I'm still really ill, hence why I sound awful. So all this travel is killing me. But I was able to do absolute authority and deny his into the breach turn one. And that really hurt Vet Guard and we're playing ITD, just being able to get up the board and get to the objectives in the way that he wanted to. So that really slowed him down. That let me sort of take agency during that game. So I managed to get a win round one. And at that point, I was straight into the Shark Tank, So my next game was against this other guy running Colts. And so it was...
I can't remember his name.
I can't. Yeah, he looks like Jon Snow. The North remembers, man. The North remembers. Yeah, so I was playing Ben with his Colts, and that was a wild game. So he came out, I think, really quite aggressive, and I was able to kill the mutants turn one, which I think let me just have enough agency to get through for the rest of the game. In that, I was running Breaches, and I thought it was going to be better than it was, but actually, in hindsight, I'm not sure that they are the pick. So if Ben had played a few things differently, I think there would have been nothing that I could have done to win that game. And even at the end, when we're sort of like rushing through to get the last few turning points done in time, like I was really seeing the true power of Colts. And I went from what I thought was a really comfortable and really strong lead on turning point 1 and 2 into like a very close final with like basically a point in it. So luckily, obviously, I was battle ready, and therefore I got the point. So it was fine. But yeah, geez, like that was a tough game. So I think I learned a lot from that, and so we've been trying to take those lessons on board and build a strategy, and we're chatting about it on the page and whatever. So I think we're going to change the way we go into that match from the future. I think RBTs might be the better option, and we'll see if we can really get to grips with it. But we're still in the testing and development stage, so we haven't really figured that one out. Into round 3, and I was against Ben with his Void Dancers, and this was a really tough match again. So Ben was running infiltration tac ops, which caught me off guard. So I was expecting him to be running seek and destroy or recon as his standard, but he was doing a combination of subversive control and siege barricades or siege defenses, sorry, and effectively playing for a turn 3 and turn 4 big point swing. So he was really quite defensive with his clowns, and I was holding back as well because I was playing seek and destroy with our BTs, and I sort of knew that at some point he's going to have to commit. I had activation advantage, so long as he committed and I could properly punish him, it would be all right. So, and there was some wild rolls, either way. So, like for instance, he threw a prismatic grenade into 3 of my guys, all of which had -1 attack damage. So I think it's about a 20% chance to kill. He managed to get at least a crit and 2 hits on each of the dice. I think on something he got 2 crits and a hit. And I didn't make like a single 4-up save, right? So like it was like, oh my god, you've like killed all these people. But against my castigator, I managed to roll, I think it was like something ridiculous, like 5 6s on my 6-up Feel No Pain. It was obscene. We love Feel No Pains, don't we? And so that managed to get me through. But yeah, geez, like that was a tough old ride. So I'd gone from Vet Guard, which is traditionally like a really strong team, into Colts, which was like absolutely brutal, into Void Dancers, again really brutal. I'm there like thinking, geez, this day cannot get any tougher. And then enter round 4, the Nemesis. The Ryan showdown continues, right? So
Ryan v Ryan.
Ryan v Ryan, and Northern Ryan had brought his Beastmen, and man, I only played into Beastmen as Votan, with on obviously on the bat rip, which you've seen on Andy's channel. So I know like roughly what they do, right? And I have a rough idea of how I'm going to beat them, but when you're playing them, it is something else. And like, it was interesting talking to the guys. So they've brought some custom King in the North dice, right? And everyone was talking about how horribly they were rolling. So like for instance, Ben earlier like didn't make a single 5-up Feel No Pain on a probably like 15 dice or something. It was ridiculous. Whereas right, Ryan got like the good batch, right? like they were fresh out of the yeah. They were fresh out of the microwave, those dice. They were like scalding, right? And I was like, oh my god. And it was like the perfect rolls as well. So I'd shoot a shotgun at a guy and I'd be like, right, that's 2 hits and a crit. I'm hitting on 3s, right? And he's like, yeah, sweet. And I've got a reroll, and he just rolls his dice looking for 5s, and he's like, yep, crit and 2 saves. And I'm like, oh my god. It's like, it's fine though. I'll shoot with the next shotgun guy. It can't happen twice in a row. It's happened twice in a row. So like it was, man, that was tough. And
maybe some P1 would have helped.
Maybe some P1 would have helped. I don't know if it would. I think, well, maybe, but I mean, it would have meant that you could only get 2 saves and would put at least 4 damage through, I guess. But yeah, like that was a game where I actually thought I'd lost it. And this is like, I guess the main takeaway from that is just it was focusing on the win condition. So Ryan went for trying to maximize his tac ops, which effectively would have given him a 2-point bump by killing one of my servitor. But in doing so, he sacrificed capturing an objective. And one of the things is when you're playing like secure, for instance, is if you capture an objective and you get a point on that turn and your opponent doesn't get that primary, well, that's a 2-point swing. And that happening on that turn and then going into turning point 4 is now a 4-point swing, which is more than the value of his tac op. And so that's what I thought he was going to do. And instead he decided to charge. And I was like, oh, there must be something here that I'm not seeing. Maybe he's got some way to get around this. And in the end, I think that the charge didn't quite work out the way he wanted it to. He lost a guy, and I managed to kill his Beastmen, revealing both Rob and Ransack. they can die. Yeah, it's just really hard. But yeah, and so I just managed to swing it at the end. But I think looking back, like that was definitely Ryan's game to give there, and I was quite lucky in that outcome. So again, I think I won that by like 1 or 2 points. Like it really wasn't very much in it at all. So a really fun tournament, as per usual when you go up north, right? They're incredible tournament, incredible scene. It was a mixture of open and ITD. It was all the turning point tactics, map packs, etc., etc. But yeah, like it was a really fantastic, good kill team tournament. I highly recommend that people go to the next one. So that was awesome fun, and I'll hopefully get to the next one. We'll see what it is.
Can you clarify? Is it an entry requirement that you have to be called Ben or Ryan to be able to enter this tournament?
That's what it seems to me, doesn't it? I'm trying to think who like the top 3 were. Oh no, because Stefan from Knots came in second place, and sneaky Russ from Kill Team Casuals once again sliding in 4th place by dodging all the tough matchups. He is absolutely incredible at doing that. I don't know how he does it. Like he is. I do know how he does it. Like he's paying probably £1,000 in Bundaberg to bribe the TOs. So I hope it's worth it, Russ. I hope it's worth it. No, I'm like one day I'll get to have my match off with him, but not today. But yeah, it was a really good tournament. So yeah, like Knots Kill Team doing well, coming up in 2nd place. Christopher Scott Bloor down from Knots Kill Team as well, came up in 6th place, just narrowly missing out on top 5 by tiebreakers. I think he did really well. I think he lost his game by 1 point was his only loss. So really close games at the top. So yeah, I ended up playing 3 of the top 8 in my games, which was pretty wild. And yeah, it was awesome fun. So I highly recommend them. And if people are interested in getting into Kill Team and they're from the north and they want to find a local tournament scene, then definitely check out King of the North, because it's a great beginner like tournament environment to go to. Okay, Connor. So that's sort of the intro sort of rounded off, and we're obviously going to go into some Patreon priority questions in a bit. But let's say that people are listening to this and they're thinking this has been pretty useful. It's been some pretty helpful stuff that you guys have been putting out. Maybe there's a way that we could support this podcast and this channel. Is there any ways that people could do that if they were listening at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, you could join our Patreon, which costs you as little as £3, which would be enough for us to afford a therapist to get around to talk out this feel no pain stuff. It's still obviously
it's gonna need a lot more than £3. For just £3 a day, you can get Ryan the help he needs to burn dice.
What does that £3 get you? Well, if you've got a burning question like some of the guys we're about to hear from, then you could put it through to our Patreon priority questions and we'll answer them on our program. Or maybe you're just interested in some exclusive Patreon-only content, like we've got battle reps going in there, general stuff. We've got a Discord now full of like-minded, competitive people going through, talking about stuff. So cool. And if you join now, you're going to become a Centurion, which is our way of recognizing the support and help that the first 100 people have given us. It's such a important, crucial time to give us support, and we want to recognise that. So if you join now, you'd be in the first 100 and you'd be a centurion. But we also recognise that there is a cost of living crisis going on. So maybe you can't afford £3, but if you just hit like and subscribe, comment and share this video, then because we're now monetized thanks to, again, the support that everyone's given us, that's another way you can support the podcast. And finally, maybe you just want to buy some Warhammer or buy some basic material. Ryan doesn't know what basic materials is. He doesn't do the hobby part, but I get you. I know you want to get, you just want to get some basic materials. Well, if you buy that through Element Games and use our affiliate link, then that's one other way to support the podcast. And they're a great little site, and they do some amazing discount. I've got a question for you, Ryan. Ashes of Faith, £95. How much do you reckon you can pick that up for on Element Games?
You're getting at least a 15-20% discount if they were in stock. So, but you could probably buy all of the individual parts of your Chaos Cult Kill team, which would normally be 90 quid, whatever. But you'd be getting a good 20% off of it if you went through.
I had a look this morning. £80, 75 pence. Like you said, 15% off. So if you're thinking about getting any models or any basic materials, have a look at Element Games. And if you buy your models through our link, then that's another way to support us.
And can we give a round of applause at home for everyone for kind of being able to say affiliate for, one of the first times?
Oh, incredible. Did you see that? I almost recorded it.
He's going to get home and get a gold sticker. It really is something. Awesome stuff. And so we're up to 75 patrons now, which is such a cool community to be a part of, because we are aware that we are quite competitively focused, right? So we're not doing too much else in that sort of stuff, but everyone in that community is equally so, and that everyone's got that mindset of how do I get better at the game, how do I share these tips and these strategies, and that's really good to see. So quite a few big things that we've got planned coming up for the rest of the year. We're going to try and do an event in London towards the end of the year. It's looking like it's going to be the 25th of November. We'll see what we can do with dates. But yeah, and there, we're going to try and make it a bit of a kill team celebration of where the channels come in effectively a year, which I think is really awesome. So that'd be really cool to do. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, if you want to subscribe, want to become a Centurion and be one of those first 100 members, then that'd be absolutely awesome for us. Speaking of patrons, we have a lot of questions to get through, Connor. So I think we should probably roll straight into it, right? What's the first question we have from the patrons?
Let's jump in. So the first one, this guy's got some difficulty playing around people that are concealing and playing well, playing precisely. What are some reliable ways to break opponents' conceal?
Okay, so I'm going to take the standard assumption that everyone out there is tracking indirect and ability, right? So if you have indirect, great. Usually has a range limitation associated to it, and you're going to be able to do some indirect damage against someone. Cool. You obviously also have the ability to get within 2 inches and just remove the ability to the fact that they're in cover. That's going to work as well. All right, so that's probably your primary 2 go-to routes, and then the next one's going to be getting up on vantages and using that to be able to ignore the light cover that's in the game, but it's not going to get through a super conceal or anything like that. Now, what I will say is this is where you can add a bit more, right? So this is where we're going to get into the next layer, next level, whatever. If your kill team has the ability to ignore obscurity, then those vantages can suddenly be a lot more valuable, all right? So it might be that the way the map's designed, you'll see it's not TPT maps, is that you can only see a certain area with a certain bit of terrain with a vantage point that's nearby, and each vantage point you go to opens up access to more light terrain that you could shoot at and shoot from. So what you can do with this is, if you have the ability to ignore obscurity, by going to one of those other points, you might be able to get access to against more light terrain, because that obscurity then isn't going to necessarily be blocking anymore. And so what I would say is, if you have multiple ways of doing this, you want to start looking at how you can position that throughout the battlefield, so you have more angles to play off of and bounce off of. And that we're into my next point is angles. All right, so I think it's really important to develop breadth on the table. If you keep all your models or all your main threats on a very similar threat axis, or you're coming in from the same direction, it becomes quite easy to position your models so that you can avoid that. if that makes sense. If all your long range threats are on the left side of the board, well, you can place all your guys on the right side of the board and know that they're never going to be able to get shot at, right? Because the lines of obscurity, the terrain, the way, etc., is going to stop that from working. Or maybe it's visibility blocking, whatever it's going to be. But let's say if you have saw on the left, saw on the right, saw in the center, and you sort of spread these threats out across the board, and you make more angles, you end up with like this sort of like lattice of problems that comes at them, and suddenly they go, I now need to be able to avoid this angle and this angle, and if they're on conceal on a central point somewhere, it might be that they're on like an edge of a piece of cover or something like that, and it's only safe from so many different angles. If you can find that angle where it's not safe from, then suddenly you're going to be able to get around and do damage that way. The next way that you could do that as well is the APL shifting, right? So if you have the ability to add APL in certain areas, again, spread this out. Okay, so you want to get breadth with this ability. If you have it all in one location, if you have your comms and your indirect right in the center, well, that's going to have quite a large bubble in the center that's a problem. But then towards the flanks, there's going to be areas where they can hide, right? So what I'd say is there ways that you can maybe com buff someone on the right flank so they can move, dash, and shoot within 2 inches, and that increases the threat range and it denies a bit more cover or breaks someone's conceal in that cover. And then same on the left flank, wherever it's going to be, right? So if you can spread that APL manipulation out, if you can spread that as well, along with those angles, it might give you the range to get the angles that you need to be able to shoot behind cover or wherever it's going to be. God, I'm really struggling today. Sorry. Okay, so the next option is going to be barricades, right? So generically, people just place down barricades where they need them to be, and that's fine. And but we have done a bit of a guide on barricades in the past. I think it's like episode 8 or something. Go check that out. Or if not, go check on the Patreon because we have a video guide on there as well. But one of the things you can do with barricades, if you position it towards like the front of an objective, you can make it so that if they hide on that piece of terrain, they're not on the objective, right? So for them to be in cover, they're not doing what they want to do with the mission. And then for them to be on the objective, they're now going to be not in cover, if that makes sense. And that's going to break their conceal. So that's an option. The other option is when you position your models, if you position back from the terrain slightly in a similar vein, you can try and make it so that for them to be able to get to you, let's say they're a commando and they can charge on conceal, you want to try and position in a way which stops them from being able to charge you and still hide in cover. And it might be that you can position slightly further out at a certain angle or a certain place, which then means that by them coming forwards and doing that, they're not going to be able to hide in the terrain that they want to hide in, and now suddenly they're exposed to your guns. And then the next option, so my final option that I have, is using bait, right? So it might be that they can't charge on conceal, but they can charge standardly or wherever it's going to be. And this is where you want to put something that's either really tanky or something that's better at melee. So let's take some out there examples. Like let's say you're playing Legionary, right? And you've got like your Shrive Talon, or you've got your Anointed, okay? These are the models that you can stick out front, and if someone charges them, well, you're not going to care too much because they're pretty good at surviving in those instances. But it's also going to put them on engage, right? So that's really useful. Or it might be that you have like an Endurance, say, that's going to sit out front, and he's going to try and make your opponent come out onto engage to do what they want to do, and that's going to let you do a counter punch. Now, it might be that where you position them is going to be in such a way that you're forcing them to come over their terrain to you, and then you can hit them to be able to get to their models, or you're going to just try and get them to expose themselves on engage in an area where you can shoot them, that sort of thing. So that's another option as well, is let them commit and then hit back when they do so. But that requires you to have like a sort of an asymmetric advantage. Maybe you strike first or parry first, or you have a feel no pain, whatever it's going to be. And that lets you win that fight or that engagement without taking too much damage. Does that make sense, Connor?
That does all make sense. It makes a lot of sense, yeah. One thing I probably would add, just thinking about it, is obviously faction dependent, but sometimes your team does have a bespoke way of dealing with this sort of thing. So I'm thinking like breaches in their cat, or Vet Guard and the Spotter, where they can remove the opponent's ability to hide in that cover as well on conceal. No, I mean, the question was reliable, so the core says Void's Guard, their foul shoe. it's a dice roll, so that's perhaps not reliable. So don't put your whole game plan on a dice roll. That's a bit ambitious.
Yeah.
But if you got a cat which guarantees something, that's probably useful.
And there's loads of teams' ability. You've got Crete, you've got it, Exaction, you've got it, Phobos, etc. So and that's a really good idea as another means, right? So try and use that as a list. I like to use APL buffs, indirect, getting within 2 inches, vantage with obscurity, working those angles, getting breadth on the board, smart barricade placement, and then worst case scenario, just using a bit of bait really. So that would be my advice to you on how best to do that. All right, Connor, should we roll into question 2?
Absolutely, let's do it. How do you go about developing balanced map layouts when you don't have Games Workshop terrain? And what if you have all the terrain? What would you mix up?
Okay, cool. So there's actually 2 questions that we sort of like paired together, and because I think they work really well together. So obviously, if you do have GW terrain, the answer is we've done a map pack for you, and that's available on our Linktree, and that's freely available to anyone that wants it. There's 2 different versions. Away you go. There's a whole bunch of maps. But if you don't have GW terrain, which is the main question, like how are you going to build those maps? So firstly, I like maps to be asymmetric. I think that's pretty much unanimously liked in the community as well. So I'm going to try and build it initially from that point of view. So look to have some asymmetry in there when you're building the map. I think you want to have 1 to 2 bits of heavy terrain in the drop zone, and that should really be enough to hide the majority of a team. All right. So if you don't have enough to hide the majority of the team behind heavy cover, you need sufficient light cover that's blocked by obscurity to do that. I think, and I know cults are very oppressive, and there's some media teams at the moment where you would really like to be able to alpha strike them in their deployment. But I personally think big alpha strikes in deployment are a quite boring game mechanic. I don't think that's going to add fun to anyone's game when you say, oh yeah, here's my spotter flipping to this guy to engage and shooting you with a frag grenade, and he hits 8 guys and I've won the game my first activation. Like, I don't think that's a fun game mechanic. So you want to have 1 to 2 bits of heavy terrain in your deployment zone, and within that heavy terrain, you want to have an area within it which is visibility blocking. Ideally, it's large enough for at least 1 engaged model, right? So your opponent should be able to have somewhere in their drop zone where they can put, like, let's say, an intercessor on engage, and not have to rely on obscurity or anything like that to survive. So it should be visibility blocking. So that might be behind like a doorway on like Morok terrain or something, or it might be behind like a Minotaurum crate, like the big crates that they have, something like that, right? Somewhere where a model can be placed and not be immediately shot off, but allows them to have a threat turn 1, a shooting threat. Generically, I think it shouldn't be any vantage in the drop zone. I think that's just again, it's just sort of a boring way of playing. I think just put vantages further out. It also becomes really a point when it comes to like recon tac ops and that sort of stuff. So I think you want at least 3 vantage points in the midboard, and I'll define the midboard as anywhere that's greater than 3 inches from your deployment zone. So if you can have that, so both sides can score vantage points, and it doesn't have to just be like just the 2. Maps like Chownath are quite difficult because they only have 2 vantage points, but that's what I tried to go with. And then I think at least 2 of each team's objectives should be safe with heavy cover. So there should be an area where you can move up in the board and get to those midfield objectives, which is safe. And then maybe you have 1 or 2 risky ones, right? But it should be balanced. So it shouldn't just be that there's 2 objectives with no terrain on it at all. Like maybe you have 2 with light terrain on, 2 with heavy cover on, and that lets players choose what they're going to do, position their models, and there can be a bit of risk on one and a bit safer on the other. I think that's quite a fun way of playing it. I think the way that you place the terrain should try to make barricade placement meaningful. And again, this is why I think there should be sufficient cover in your deployment. If you're just putting barricades down in your own deployment zone, I think the map design's somewhat failed. I think it's more interesting to have barricades in the midfield so that people can move up to them and find ways to place them. We'll put them on objectives where there wasn't sufficient cover to make sufficient cover, because it really makes you then have an interesting discussion of, do I take a 3rd barricade? Do I place this over here, etc., etc. Whereas if you're just putting barricades in the deployment zone because there wasn't sufficient cover, Again, it's kind of, it removes a fun part of the competitive experience. A few other, just generic points. Models need to be able to be placed within 3 inches of the center for security tac ops, and need to be able to be placed on the center line. So don't put like a fence that runs the whole length of the board directly down halfway or something, to stop people being able to score that. I also like there to be a 40mm spacing between all terrain. I don't think you need to go to 50mm. I'm sorry, Necrons, but you have fly anyway, so you don't really care. But I think 40mm is like a good amount, right, to be able to make sure that people can get like their Ogryn through and their Gelapox through, right? Because if you just make all the gaps 32mm and then just laugh at Gelapox as they can't actually reach you, I don't think that's particularly fun. So try and make it so that there's routes where people can get through on those 40mm bases. And then, the next thing is, like, you have to have heavy terrain in the midboard. So I sort of said you probably want 1 to 2 pieces, covering, like 2 of the objectives. I know people are going to be saying, well, cults are a thing. Maybe we could just redesign the map so there's no terrain. And they've got a good point. Fuck cults, but but no, like, I think you still want to have that ability to be able to move up in heavy cover. I think, again, it makes it more interesting. And I would say that if you're erring on the side of caution as to what to have, it is better to have more heavy cover than light, if that makes sense. If you have too little heavy, it's far worse than having too much heavy, in my opinion. Just double check that your maps work for tac ops as well, right? So just think about that. Okay, so how would we do that with all of the GW terrain if you had that and you wanted to mix it up and make it a bit more variety, a bit more interesting? So I think the Octarius terrain is really good for to have one of those sort of L-shaped orc buildings in your deployment zone. I think that's really useful, or I should say just on the border deployment zone, because it gives you that visibility block. It has a door, it's got a vantage point, it's perfect. And then in the mid, that's where I'd start using my sort of my Chalnath, my Morok, and my Nakmund. And I would just mix it up based on what I want to do. And I would choose, some of the heavy out of Chalnath, and I put that on some of the objectives. Some of the light maybe from Nakmund, some of the pipe works, or some of the advantages that they have. Maybe I'll take some of the fences from Morok, and I would just try and use a variety of that sort of stuff in the midboard. I'd probably avoid the large landing pad on Morok. I think it's very hard to get right, and it's quite restrictive in its placement. So I tried for a long time to try and figure out where best to put these things, and you end up basically putting it in the same place on every map because that's where it fits effectively. So that's what I would do, and hopefully that sort of answers your questions. But feel free to use those sort of like key principles and just use the terrain that you have to build to them. And I think that would lead to quite a fun experience.
No, I think you've answered that quite nicely. Yeah, and maybe we should think about just trying to capture those core principles succinctly, so it's just a go-to people can look at and tick off almost as they're building the maps as they go along.
Yeah, I can track it on the Patreon, just put it as a checklist. That sounds really good idea.
One thing I would say, just thinking about tournaments and tournament organisers, I think players are quite forgiving because they understand that there is a limitation on terrain, and people just want to play a game at the end of the day and enjoy it. So if you do deviate, perhaps just let people know well in advance this is what the terrain's going to be, so they can plan accordingly.
Yeah, and I think as well you can just do a bit of a briefing at the start and just let everyone know what's heavy and what's light. And what the key rules are, because that's going to be like a main thing. So, for instance, on our map pack, we put a little disclaimer at the start which tells you what terrain does what, just as a rough guide, so people can then see roughly what we're thinking. But you're absolutely right. It's difficult work being a TO, and getting all the terrain that you need at the right time and all that sort of stuff is hard enough as is. So sometimes you just have to work with what you've got, right? And it might be that you have 150 crates of generic 40k terrain. Well, that's what you're going to use, and you can't expect them to all have bespoke kill team stuff. I will say that a lot of tournaments are doing a fantastic job crowdsourcing this stuff. To keep doing that, but it's I think if you follow those principles and you explain to people what's going on, you should have fun on whatever train you use.
Cool. Question 3 then. Do you ever play compendium teams just for fun? Now you have to clarify, what does this fun word mean? I've not heard that before.
I'm not sure. Is that when your opponent leaves in tears? Is that
Yeah, it must be. Yeah.
is that fun, or is that when you don't let them score a single VP? Is that
It's when
no?
you crush them so hard they have to rethink whether kill teams for them.
It's not simply enough that you win. You must make them quit the hobby. Yeah. No, I'll just answer this one. No. Question 4. No. Actually, there's a few like companion teams that I will play or I find interesting and fun. So Talons of the Emperor, Custodes. I love my Golden Boys. I think they're a fun team. But probably the companion team that I've played the most is actually just Compendium Imperial Guard Scions. I've had some really good fun with Scions, and they're great fun on Into the Dark. So when I've been to team tournaments, whatever, I've not been able to take the whatever team it is. Scions have been one of the teams that I've gone to, but now we sort of have, I think Kazakin are a good place, and they sort of scratch that itch for me. It's probably going to be Talons. I know there's a few teams that you probably like playing, Connor.
I enjoy stealth suits. I think I acknowledge that they suck, but as a team that's fun and they just look cool. I love the models. If it's a non-competitive game, I'll get the stealth suits out and we can have some fun. I know I'm going to get stomped, but I can enjoy it and I like thinking about it. But I'm hoping in my head that they create a bespoke stealth suit team. If not, maybe I'll run stealth suits as clowns and do like a switch that way to get my fix. But yeah,
like an 8-man stealth suit team. They're all void dancers. Yeah, I mean, it'd be cool. I think that's one thing you can do, right? So let's say you're not having the fun that you want to for whatever reason with your companion team. Well, it's like, can you proxy them as something else? Like, can you find a team that does work that matches the same flavor that you're after? And you might find that there is, So don't be afraid to do that as well. But generically, I'm pretty hard into my bespoke teams at the moment. I'm doing a lot of like tournament prep in a way. So I know we're doing a whole variety of teams, but I'm still trying to be one of the most competitive players. And what you see most commonly is going to be those bespoke teams. So sure, companion teams just for fun. I think there was a tournament in London once which was just companion teams only and that sort of stuff, which is always a laugh. But generically, I play significantly more bespoke, but I'm not afraid to roll out the Golden Boys every now and then.
Cool. Question 4. What is the best way to prepare for playing on Chem-zone terrain?
Okay, so this is an interesting one. So the UK tournament circuit has this Chem-zone terrain. It actually kind of links into what we were saying earlier about terrain, actually. And it's what they usually use at like London Grand Tournament, but they've also used it, I think, at the Bristol GT and various other tournaments across the UK. So it's a bit of a weird one because it interacts a lot with obscurity rules in odd ways. So I'd say make sure you're fully au fait with obscurity, particularly when you're on advantage. So, for instance, let's say you're on a crate. Like, you can't pop-tart like you normally can on crates, which like sounds really weird. But because you can only ignore 1 inch in front of you and the way the 3D cover lines are cut, if you try and pop-tart at the back of a crate, usually those Chem-zone crates are just slightly too thick, so 1 inch doesn't get you right the way to the other end of the cover. If you still have an overhang, unless you're like, no, it doesn't work. So you end up like not being able to shoot from the top of the crate unless you're not overhanging the back. So you have to have some tactics there to be able to figure out how you're going to get around not pop-tarting. And one of the options is like you can just hang off the edge, so you can have a guy pop-tart on the far left or far right of a container potentially, and then take the cover line from the left side of your base, which isn't interacting with the cover. That could be a good way around it. Or you can use some method of ignoring obscurity to be able to get up there, and then use that to be able to ignore it as well. So think about those methods of obscurity, but also understand that doesn't work reciprocally, right? So just because you're on the train and they are obscured to you. The way the train rules works means that they can shoot you absolutely fine back, right? So, like, be careful with that. Don't get caught out and get shot. So, I think really get into those obscurity rules and understand how they interact with Vantage, and make sure you're not misplaying or getting caught out by something by one of those rules. I think as well, like, the terrain blocks visibility in really weird ways. And initially, when you look at it, like the LGT maps that we had, I thought that it was going to shut down shooting quite a lot, and you wouldn't be able to see much. But actually, shooting teams are still pretty valid on those maps. And I think it's best to like actually go and do it for real and play as it would be. I used a bunch of proxy terrain to try and get some experience in, but it wasn't quite the same, and it did lead to some false lessons. So if you can get the actual terrain yourself, play on that. I think shooting teams are still valid. That's one of the things we learned. Pathfinders ended up coming, I think, all like 1, 2, 3, 4 or something. So they're definitely still up there as a means of doing it. But ultimately, with all these terrain things, it really comes down to however they're laid out on the day. And I can't really tell you what that's going to be like. So if they release a map pack ahead of time, that's ideal, and maybe something you can ask the organisers for is, hey, do you have an idea of what the maps are going to look like on the day? And then you can start practicing as a result. But because it might be that they have, for instance, just like all the heavy is on the edge of the board and there's nothing in the mid board, or it might be that they have no heavy in the deployment zones, or whatever it's going to be. I don't know. So it's still going to come down to terrain layout, and I think you're still going to have to go into every game as you would do normally and really assess that terrain layout as it is, and try and build a game plan based on what you see in front of you. And you can go back to sort of the attacker-defender episode that we did a little while back now and think, when you're selecting board size and map size and that sort of stuff, what is it you're actually looking for? How are you analysing the map? And make sure you really get the most out of it is probably what my advice would be. Any fill-ins on that, Connor? Or are we good to move on to question 5?
No, but I think just for those guys out there scratching their head, I just want to clarify. So the reason that they can shoot back at you is because it's 2 inches to be obscured from terrain, and obviously you're only an inch and a bit away from the edge of that lip, so that's why they can.
Yeah, so that's one reason, and it's also because when you're on a vantage, cover beneath you is ignored when you're shooting up. So the combining factors of both is why you can be shot and but not shoot them, which kind of sucks. So something to be aware of.
Brilliant. Okay, so jumping into the next question then, how do you approach winning the 5th turning point? How do you approach winning that 4th objective?
So obviously the 4th objective is the primary aim of the 5th turning point. So you got to have a game plan, right? So like right back at the beginning, to begin this question, let's look at: are you on a 3-3-3-4? Are you on a 2-3-4-4, a 4-3-3-3, etc., etc.? Like, what is your game plan? If you're on a 4-4-4-4 game plan, then all credit to you. But like that's my first point is going to be, you have to know roughly what game plan you're on. This is going to be a bit mission dependent as well. So like, let's say you're on loot, then you want to bias a lot of your actions towards the start of the turning point. Whereas if you're on secure or capture, well, particularly capture, you want it all to be towards the end of the turning point, right? And secure is like somewhat, it depends what your the APL difference is, right? So if you're on an elite team, you want to do it towards like the end because you have the APL advantage and you can just bully people on objectives. And if you're an APL matching team, so you're both 2 APL, then actually doing it quite quickly is useful. So it is mission dependent, but let's say if we're doing like loot or secure, then I think one of the first things you'll look at is like where do you have 3 mission actions on your team, or where do you have 3 APL, and what can you do to be able to spread those so that you can reach the objectives that you want to be able to reach, and really prioritize. Like, let's say you're playing loot, some of your objectives it's like physically impossible for your opponent to reach on turn 1, and some of the objectives in the midfield they definitely can reach. So if your first activation is taking a physically impossible to take objective, well, you're wasting a VP there. So start with the contentious stuff first on loot, and then work your way out. On secure, you have to really look at like what's your ability to of your opponents take it back, right? So like if you're playing you're a 2 APL team and you're playing against a 3 APL team, well, you moving and you'll move dash and I'll secure this point over here on the left, and then the next activation, a intercessor just walking up to it and taking it back from you is really pointless. So you don't want to do that, right? But maybe you can have like an icon bearer that you can move and dash onto that objective, who's now going to hold it for you and stop your opponent being able to actually take it, and you can just leave them there, right? So now you've got that advantage on that objective, and you don't really care, what they do, but you're going to do that early on secure. Whereas let's say you're playing capture, your icon bearer is going to move late, right? Like you don't want to put him out and be a threat straight away. You want to put him so that it's a surprise at the end, and the icon bearer is going to turn up and take it away when they're not expecting it, right? So that's kind of like a understanding when to move where is probably what I'd go from that. So that is going to come from a game plan, right? So if your game plan is going to be that you're only going to take 2 objectives on turning point 1, then don't commit so much resources to get 3 VP or to contest your 2 VP if that's not your game plan, right? Because if you overcommit resources, then it's just going to punish you. So think about ways of doing that. One other thing as well, like let's say you have GA2 available to you, that can be a really good way to just bully points on like loot. So you can take 2 points on turning point 1 potentially with GA2, or you can group activate 2 guys onto an objective to get 4 APL and bully an elite off of it and take it away from them. So that's another way around it as well. The other thing I'd say is like with APL modifiers is like you can use that in a smart way to not just be offensive on turning point 1, but to play the mission on turning point 1/2 as well. So let's say you're playing capture, like you could move your guys onto those objectives, and it's a stalemate, right? It's 2 APL versus 2 APL, and no one's winning those objectives. And then your Kazakin comms guy buffs both of your models that are on those 2 objectives, and suddenly, boom, you've now got 3 APL on both those objectives, and you're 4-2 up turning point 1. So think about where those APL modifiers can go, and can you apply those after that model's activated to give you a mission bonus, or like do you need that offensive bonus right now? Because if it's a risky proposition that you're actually going to kill the person that you're trying to remove from that objective, well, maybe you actually want to make sure that you just guarantee the win this turning point, and then you still have that offensive advantage going into the next one as well. So that could be a way of doing it. And then like you can also look to see if you have any like terror-like abilities, like any ways to make your opponent count as being -1 on those objectives. Can you stack those in the right locations so that can then be used in a way to be able to actually flip that objective into a way that works for you? I don't know, that could be an option as well. And then finally, I think you need to look at what your opponent's bringing, right? And how that they're laid out and what range they have to be able to reach objectives and what ability they have once they get there. So it might be that you can look at them and say, actually, you only have 1 model that can reach that objective. Or, you have 2 models and whatever it's going to be. And you go, so if I take that now or I kill that model, there's no way that you can get that point. And that's going to let me get there and get that 4th objective point straight away. So that could be another way of doing it. And that's like that's how I would try and build from deployment out is really look at planning that who are my models that are going to go into those central objectives, how are they going to get there, what's their route, where do they need to position, and look to see where your opponent's deploying and be like, is there a way that I can stack more on this flank to be able to beat that or wherever it's going to be, and try and do it that way. And that's probably how I try and get that 1-up point. And if you can't do it from like a technical, point of view of APL advantage where it's going to be, then can you make it so that the threat to that location is is so high that you can remove any model that goes on it is the other option. Or can you just accept that you're going to be on a 2-2-4-4 game plan, wherever it's going to be, or a 2-3-4-4, by letting your opponent overcommit turn one and then be so violent and so aggressive on turning points 2, 3, etc., that you've removed their ability to stay on that objective by just removing enough models consistently. It's a bit of a higher risk one, but it's another option that's available to you. Probably one of the ones that you would think's favourable, Connor. But yeah, I think that's probably it. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that, Connor?
I do. I'm just struggling to formulate a question out of it. So what I'm thinking about is the fact that you said you just played Ben and you thought you had it in the bag, and then actually, nope, it came back and it came very close. And I reckon there's probably some lessons there that are applicable to this question. Could you talk us through that scenario and how you recognised that there was a problem occurring, and then what you changed or adapted to make sure you won that fourth objective?
Well, so in that scenario, I think we were even on objectives turning point 3, and I managed to go up on turning point 4 because effectively I was Ben, by committing mutants early and losing them. He didn't have many people to do mission actions, and we're playing secure, which I think is probably like secure and loot are what you want to fight these guys on. You don't want to play them on capture. So
nice.
It was really about balancing that, and I had to plan ahead a lot about where my guys were going to go and who was going to do what objectives and who was going to secure what and where my comms buff was going to go to make sure that I definitely got those 3 APLs or on the right objectives at the right time. And sometimes it means that you sacrifice shooting, right? So sometimes it means that you don't get a kill because you're actually going to boop the objective, and you're going to use an icon in a way that means that they're not going to be able to take it back, wherever it's going to be. And because they're only 2 APL, they have to either kill you, but that doesn't help them because the objective still remains yours. So that's another way of looking at it. So that's what I'd say. And in Ryan's game, it's one of those points where it's like, look at the primaries and look at the differential. So you gaining 2 points, is that good? Or is that the same as me losing 1 and you gaining 1, and then the next turn that being the same again? Like, that's actually 4 points difference, So that's something that I would say is something else to consider.
Brilliant. Nice one. Okay, so the next question then. Can you discuss asymmetric matching in the new melee-heavy meta?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So obviously, we talked about it in the past, and they sort of said, "Hey, can you just like revisit it because now things have clearly changed," and they definitely have changed. So I guess the first thing that you want to do is like melee is like a really weird thing because it's a trading game, melee, right? And you really have to have a question of if you're going to expose a model to that, like who is better, right? And it might be that you have someone that's like, let's say, a devotee, and they're not actually that good at melee, right? But they're better in melee than a vet guardsman. So you don't want to put that person out there to fight them. But let's say you're playing like Inquisition. I'm happy to let maybe my Death World veteran fight a devotee, right? But I'm not going to let a Death World veteran fight a torment, right? So it's like you have to really know who's better in those scenarios. And the simple question is if you're better, then fine. Let that symmetric matchup happen. It works well for you. If it is obvious that they are better than you, then you really want to just lean into shooting. So the way that I would look at it is that the game tries to balance it where possible. So if you move and shoot, generically you're going to move 6 inches and you have that 2-inch ignore cover, so you have an 8-inch threat range generically. And the charge is going to have a 9-inch threat range, right? Because they can move 8 and end within 1 inch to be able to fight you. So you can immediately get this into your advantage by using barricades, unless they have some like ignore traverse rule like cults. But you against some teams you can change that, so you can make it so that suddenly you have an 8-inch threat range, but they only have a 7-inch threat range, for instance, with smart barricade placement. And the other way you can change it though as well is use APL buffs, so you can make it so that you can move and dash to give yourself an 11-inch threat range, or you can use indirect to make it a 12-inch threat range. And this is kind of the thing of like, is there a way that you can hold back enough? So commit only what you need to forwards against these melee teams, and make sure what you're committing forward is your durable, like good melee operatives, and then increase the shooting range of your back line so that whoever it is that they're hiding, you can move and dash and shoot at 11 inches. And there's currently no charges that I'm aware of that are 11 inches in range. Now, obviously, there is the plus 1 inch move and charge, which is a 10 inch threat range, which a team like Colts might have. But, that's something for you to be aware of, but that's still not as good as an 11 inch threat range. So, generically, I think just keep that in your mind of like, where can you get that advantage to be able to, match up against the right models in the right ways. So if it's turning point 1 and it's a mutant, you can guarantee that the turning point 2 is going to be a torment, right? So sit 10 inches away, 10.1 inches away from the torment, all right? And don't let it get to that point to you. The other way to do this is, let's say your opponent hasn't moved yet because they have activation advantage. A lot of people are like, well, where can I possibly go? Where do I move to? And that, it's a good question. I would say, like, look at where they want to go to. So, like, they're going to go into cover, right? They're not going to stand in the open unless it's their last activation. They're hoping for initiative. So, like, try and use that to your advantage. So maybe look at where the cover is that they can reach with their current move this turn, and then measure 11 back from that, right? So this is obviously good on like the short board edges where you have the depth to be able to do this. It's much harder on some of the other ones. But yeah, like that's probably how I would try and solve that problem set.
Gleaming. I think you hit the nail on the head. You did mention movement though, and that rolls in quite nicely to our next question, actually, because the guy's struggling with Hearthkin. He says, how can I overcome Hearthkin's movement?
Yeah, so this is a good one. And obviously this was pre-balanced data slate, so we're in a better place now, for the dwarves, because they get that extra inch of move on their normal moves, which is like massively, it can't be understated how much of a difference that's going to make for this team, because I think they're actually pretty durable and they're pretty killy. This is just going to let them have the edge where they need it, all right? So I'm excited to see how this goes down. But there's still it's still not great, right? So, and I think there's a few things that you can do that's going to help you be able to overcome this as a problem set. So this is going to come down to, I'll use like the phrase game plan, whatever. But it's really planning your routes, all right? So you need to think on deployment, right? Is where am I going to go with my models to get to these objectives? So like, where are the mid objectives that you want to reach? And when do you want to reach them? And if the answer is turning point 1, and you want to be able to reach both of them, then you need to plan a model that can reach it with the movement potential that they have. And to help you with that, you have things like the excavation tool, which means that you can ignore traverse, which means that in a weird way, you can be like almost slightly faster than a standard person paying the traverse penalty, because you'll be moving 5 and then dashing 3, whatever. And you have a free mission action, then you're able to go 8, whereas someone else will be going 7. So you have an ability to do that. So plan those out in your mind and be like, how do I get those 8 inches in where I need them to be, so to speak, and really try and figure that out. And it might be that you need a comms buff in a certain place, or whatever. The next thing is, as well, is like on turning point 2. Let's say you've gone for like a 3-3 game plan, and your lug or whatever's gone up. He's done his free mission action on turning point 1, and away he goes. And it might be that you need to be able to get that there's a key threat that you need to kill on an objective, but you also need to be able to do your mission action. So at the end of turning point 1, put one of your decent weapons 5 inches away from the objective that it needs to get to, right? And then use that Ancestors of Watching ability to give you a free shoot. And that's really going to help you maximize your action efficiency. So then you can move on and you can loot the objective where it's going to be, and you can shoot. So that, again, it all requires setup, right? So it's a lot of brain work, but you have to be constantly thinking, all right, so turn 1, who are my objective getters, and who are my objective getters on turn 2, and who are my objective getters on turn 3. And other ways that you can do this is like when you're positioning these models, you can try and position them so they're 5 inches away from both objectives, so they can swing left or they can swing right. If you have a flex model in the middles, maybe you're on like a 2-2 or a 2-3-4-4 game plan, whatever it's going to be. Maybe your lugger goes in the middle, turning point 1, so he can reach either of the central objectives on turning point 2, but he has that flex option, right? So he's not locked into it, and he can go either way because he's going to be 8 inches away from them, something like that, right? And the routes that you're going to use to get there are going to have your excavation tools on there to mean that you can flow through them somewhat freely. It is a lot of planning ahead, but that's how I would try and skin that problem with half skin movement. Is almost look at the map right from the beginning and make your objective plan from then, which can be tough to do.
Nice, good one. We've got another question here from someone else who's struggling with their faction. He says, how do I play with Hand of the Archon on Into the Dark?
Okay, that's a good question. So I am not a Hand of the Archon expert, and we didn't really want to just like cuff it because I think that would have been unfair. So we actually went and asked Ben. Sorry, I've ruined it. We've given him credit. Damn it. So this other guy, yeah, we'll have to re-record it. He'll be there chanting at home that he's been given acknowledgement. Unbelievable. Never mind. Okay, so anyway, we asked Ben, who has played quite a bit of Hand of the Archon, and he gave us some points. Do you want to run through those, Connor?
Yeah. So Ben says, "Don't bother." So hopefully that's answered. And no, he did say that, but he goes into a bit more detail here. So he says, fleet round 1 is your only chance positionally, because then you've at least got a chance of getting into a room, and then use From Darkness Death to give the extra inch movement buff to give you a full charge across a room. Also, don't forget the Shredder. The Shredder is good, but he agrees that it is a bit of a struggle, especially into teams like Intercession, and it's 2-for-1 trade going on, so don't feel bad that you're struggling. I think it is a tough matchup. He does want to point out, though, because you can full move and then set up for turning point 2, the Dark Lance is actually a possibility against elites on ITD, so I think normally you wouldn't take that, but perhaps there's opportunities to bring that. And again, just like on Open, as well as in ITD, if you can't get that pain token train rolling into turn point 2, you've got no chance. So try and get those pain tokens built up quick.
Some good points there, and I think the shred is great on ITD, so lean into that as well, and your ability to proc that rending, and don't forget as well. I think this is quite a common thing: is you can, during a normal move, you can carry on moving when you're opening a door, right? So although you stop to open it, you can still use your remaining increments of move, so you're not locked into just moving up to the door and opening it. So you can get onto objectives by moving through, and if you had like fleet, you could do that with a move and then a dash to be able to get some quite good distance on turning point 1, and maybe set up some charges for turning point 2. Is an option.
He's a good, that guy. I've forgotten his name. Would you get him on the show? Was it Jon Snow? Get him on. Cool. Last question then. How can I win with Legionary on every map against every team every time?
Okay, that's quite a wide question to answer. We'll try and do our best. So I think the first step really is your aspiring champion. You need to name Ronan decks, and unless you do that, then you're immediately at a disadvantage. I think as well, when you're building your kill team and the kill team construction, the icon bearer really needs to be modelled as Aquaman. And if he's not 100%. Modelled like as Aquaman, I think you can do quite a good sort of Alfarius scheme with like the scale armor and stuff, and a big trident. But like if you're not doing that, then again you're at quite a big disadvantage. So that's probably the next thing that I would say as ways to go. and finally, you can just subscribe, and you'll get access to our Legionary guide when we release it, and hopefully that will have a lot of the answers that are in there. If you're not understanding what we're talking about, and you're like, what is this wizardry and witchcraft that they're talking about, then you're not watching enough Kill Team Casuals. So go over to their channel, go give it a listen, and hopefully it will all make sense. Because Legionary are a Stargate tier team in my eyes. Maybe not on the tabletop, but there you go. And we'll definitely be covering them soon, hopefully in a bit more detail, to be able to get the stuff out there, which is, I think, really awesome. So check out Kill Team Casuals and give it a listen, and you can find out a bit more about what all that just meant, hopefully. All right. Was there any more questions from the patrons, Connor?
No, and we've gone a bit long, but for a good reason, for a good cause, I think. So maybe we should probably tie this off.
Probably wrap it up there. I mean, I'm sorry, guys. Like, this is probably going to sound awful to listen to, with me like trying to struggle through in the background. But hopefully, I'll be better soon, and my voice will be a bit more well rested. But I do think that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. So hopefully, you did find something useful whilst listening to that. If you did, as I said, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated. Dropping a comment, sharing it amongst your friends, and that sort of stuff is all a massive help to us. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as the next one drops. It really is like a fantastic way to help a small channel like ours. We're up to 1,100 subscribers now, and we keep going up, which is really, really awesome. As always, we'll say this again, but if you can't wait and you do want early access, we do have a Patreon. We're up to 75 patrons now, which is going to give you that exclusive access to all our content ahead of time. It also gets you on into our Discord, gets you access to these patron priority questions, etc., etc. So loads of big perks and benefits there, and you get to be a Centurion for being one of the first 100 to join up, which would be awesome. If that's not for you, and you want to leave some thoughts and feedback, or you want to let us know how we're doing, whether it's going to be, drop a comment below, and we'll get right to you. Is there something in this guide or chat that you think we've overlooked, or we've maybe got wrong, where it's going to be, or you think that you've got a solution to cults or to Beastmen that we've not yet covered? That'd be great to hear. So drop that down there and below, and we'll get to you as soon as possible. As always, thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Ryan. This has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.